Hello again. Welcome to the second video of our journey, getting ready for baptism and exploring questions of life. My name's Sam, if you're just joining us in this week, and I hope you've been enjoying it so far. We really value your feedback on these videos and things. But let's just do a quick recap before we hit the next part of the Christian story. So we talked last time about how baptism is the beginning of our journey as a Christian, and how actually to become a Christian is described in the Bible as being born again into a new life. So to be a Christian, it's like you live in a new world because you see it in a whole new way. And we talked about how the way that we see the world is a bit like wearing different glasses of the different things that we believe, that we've been taught, different things that have happened to us, the different ways that shape how we see the world, how we understand ourselves, how we understand the people around us, and how we answer big questions like, why are we here? Where did everything come from? What's important in life and what isn't? What makes a good person and what doesn't? All of those things are shaped by how we see the world. And to be a Christian is to believe that the truth about the world, we find it in the Bible and in the story of the Bible that tells us about God and that tells us about Jesus right as the hero of that story. And that we believe that in Jesus we get to see what God is like, but also we get to be made new. We get to start a new life where we live in relationship with God, loved by Him, known by Him, and living for Him. And so to be a Christian and to get baptized baptism is a moment where we publicly say we believe in Jesus and want to live for Him, and we answer these four questions. Do you turn away from sin? I do. Do you reject evil? I do. Do you turn to Christ as Saviour? I do. And do you trust in Him as Lord? I do. And we're exploring a bit about what those questions mean by understanding the big story of the Bible. And we talked about how the start of the big story is about creation. It's actually that the reason why anything is here and why you and me are here is because there is a God who is so full of love that He wanted to make people and things to love. And that's where the world came from. And that the beginning of the Bible, the very first story in the Bible, is about God creating everything. And we talked about how the way it's written is actually that God made the world to be like a temple where He could be worshipped and loved. And in the middle of the world, the last thing He made were people, you and me, man and woman, to be His image, to reflect Him, so that when you look at people, you get to see what God is like. And one way of seeing that story is a bit like this, okay? Imagine that this jug is God, and He is totally full of life, and that water inside of Him represents life. And that in the story that we read in Genesis is that He made Adam and Eve, okay? He made people, man and woman. And He made us like these glasses to be totally open to Him. There was nothing between Adam and Eve and God. And it meant that He could just fill them with His life, like this, okay? And this is how we're made to be. This is why I personally think that so often people don't act just like animals. Animals do things to survive, but people don't seem to just want to survive. We're not set on that. We want to do something more, be something more. And it's why we will actually sacrifice to love. And you get to see that kind of reflection of God in the way that people will be kind to one another, be kind to strangers, in the way that people will love one another, and in the way that we want to develop things. Look at stuff like beauty and art and the way that we don't just make homes to live in to survive, but we make them to be beautiful. What is that? That is what God is like. The one that we're made to reflect and be His image and be loved by and to love. And so you've got Adam and Eve right at the beginning. But here's the question. If God made everything so great, why is it's so messed up. Yeah? If you and me are made to reflect God, why is it that we also get to do some pretty rubbish things? And why is it that we see other people doing really horrendous things? And why is it that we see just bad stuff that seems to happen with no explanation? Why is there a coronavirus in the world right now? Pretty massive questions. And we could talk about them more on Zoom, but I'm going to give a short kind of understanding right now, which is that this is where sin and evil come into the story. Okay? And we need to understand what those things mean. So what do you think of when you think about the word sin? I don't know, you think about being naughty, about being rubbish, about getting things wrong. Sin we don't use that word very much, and we don't like it that much. But the heart of sin in the Bible is not just about being naughty, okay? It's not that God is some head teacher in the sky who was looking at you, just waiting for you to mess up, get it wrong, and then he can say, aha, you're rubbish. That's not what God is like. Sin is different. And to understand it, we need to look at the story right from the beginning of the Bible. So in the story, this is what it says. Make of it what you will. It says that God made Adam and Eve, and he put them in the Garden of Eden. And they were surrounded by loads of amazing trees and incredible things. And amongst those trees, in the middle of the garden, there was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And there was the tree of life. Just imagine these things are trees. Okay, and God said, you can eat anything from anywhere. It's all made for you to enjoy. And they used to walk and talk with each other in the garden in relationship with him. He said, but don't eat from those two trees, otherwise you'll die. Anyway, one day, Adam and Eve are walking through the garden, and Eve comes to this tree, and she sees that the fruit looks really yummy and good to eat. And the story says that the devil came as a snake and said to her, did God really say, don't eat that fruit? She says, he says, did God really say you can't eat any of the fruit in the garden? And she says, oh no, he just said we can't eat that fruit, otherwise we'll die. And he says, no, you won't really die. You will just become like God, because you'll know for yourself what's good and bad. And basically, you won't need God anymore. And it says that when Eve saw that the fruit looked really yummy, really good to eat, and when she realized that it would let her know what was good and bad, that she would know what God knows, she decided to eat it. Not only did she eat it, but she gave it to Adam as well, and they both decided to eat it. Now this right here is sin. But what is it? Is it that they broke the rules? Yes, partly, but that's not the heart of it. The heart of it is that in that decision to eat that fruit, they were saying, we don't want to live so that we have to rely on God. We don't want to depend on God. We don't want to be reliant on him and have to trust him for everything. We don't want to be dependent on God. We want to be just like God, able to live on us by ourselves and be our own boss. And in that moment, what happened was that they broke this relationship with God. And so it says, God has said to them, you will die. Now, they didn't physically die. And we still live today. But spiritually, they died. If you imagine that God is the source of all life, and they're made to be open to him, full of his life, what happened in that moment is it's like they were suddenly closed off to God. Instead of being open for him, they are now closed off to him. And now there's a broken relationship. So it said that as soon as they had eaten it, they suddenly realized they were naked. They felt ashamed, and they ran and they hid from God. Suddenly they feel guilty, they feel scared, they feel ashamed. None of those things were meant to be part of their life. But those are the very things that start to shape our lives when we decide we want to live as the boss and without God. If you think of the word sin, S-I-N, in the middle of it is this I. Sin is deciding to live, that we would rather live as our own boss without God than relying on God. And what happens in that moment is that as we break our relationship with God, suddenly we find ourselves, it's almost like we're in a different world. Because now we're in a world where we get scared, where we feel guilty, where we get ashamed, and where we begin to hurt one another. The very next thing that happens in the story is that Adam and Eve have to leave the garden, they have kids, and their two sons get jealous of one another and one kills the other. And it goes from bad to worse all the way through. And so today, it's like this is a picture of what we are still doing today. So today we still choose that we would rather live without God than with Him, even though we might know that He's good and loving, because we'd rather be our own boss. And it means that we now live lives where we are scared, where we get guilty, where we feel ashamed, where we start hurting one another and hurting other people. And here's the thing, if you don't think it applies to you, just let me ask you this, okay? Imagine that on my phone, I managed to create an app that I could take a photo of you, and then from that photo, it would make a video of your entire life. Everything you've ever thought, everything you've ever felt, and everything you've ever done. And I could show that video to everyone. I'd say, look, we're going to put it on YouTube, and everyone in the whole world can watch that video. Would you want that? No. Because it's messy. And because we know that there's so much in us that is broken. Sin is partly about how we get broken and messed up in ourselves. And then, as broken and wounded people, we then hurt other people around us. But then it's more than that. Because we get stuck and we get trapped in it. Think about it. Has there ever been something that you know you didn't want to do, but you just can't stop yourself doing it? That's being stuck in our mess. But it's not just sin, there's also this thing called evil. And that is a word that we don't always like that much. But you can see it in a couple of ways. One way is that you can see it in the way that we do get stuck doing things that we don't want to do and we can't break out of it. Another way the Bible describes it is that kind of when we sin, we die, and that we choose to live without God. We're not spiritually alive. We're not alive to Him. We don't know what it's like to be full of His life and full of His love. And so we live with fear and mess. To be in sin, it means that we live blind. It's like we're believing lies. Okay, so we're believing there's not enough in this world for us. We can't trust one another, and we hurt one another, and we believe that we're not safe, that God doesn't love us, that He isn't there, that He isn't for us. So we live like we have to protect ourselves from other people. To be in sin, it also means to be stuck in that it's not just what I think, but it's what everyone around me thinks. So we end up finding ourselves in a culture and society, in a way things work that is shaped by this belief that we can't trust each other, there isn't enough, and we have to look after ourselves. And so we end up being in a society where we hurt one another and we can't get out of it. But there's also, the story of the Bible also tells us that in this moment, all of creation was broken. Something was broken right at the heart of all of creation. And so we now live in a world that is wounded. And that is partly where things like viruses and mess come from. It's not how God intended it to be, but it has been broken because of our decision to try and live for ourselves and creation being broken. And then there is this also another reality that we believe as Christians, which is that there is a thing known as evil, that there is an enemy. And he will lie to us about God, lie to us about ourselves. And he will try to get us to do the things that he wants us to do. And that's a big topic, and we talk about that more. For some people, that is very, very real. For others, it seems too airy-fairy. But for all of us, I wonder if we can accept there's a mess in our lives amongst what looks like it should be good. There is a searching for something more, but then also a living with this fear and this rubbish and doing things that we don't want to do. And I want to end by saying this. Jesus told a story that describes this whole dynamic. He said there was a father who represents God who was really, really good and loving, and he had 2 sons. And one day his youngest son came to him and said, I want my share of the inheritance right now. In other words, he's saying, Dad, I wish you were dead and I didn't have you around anymore. I just want all your stuff now. And his dad is so loving, is so good that he gave his son what he was asking for. And so his son ran off with all this money and lived the high life and had parties and loads of friends and a great, amazing time until all the money ran out. And when there was no money left, his friends left him. They didn't want to know him. And he ended up having to get a job feeding the pigs. And then one day he came to his senses and he thought, hold on, even the servants in my father's house have food to eat. I'm going to go back and I'm going to say sorry. And I'm going to say, I don't deserve to be your son anymore. Just make me a servant. And Jesus said this. He said that the father wasn't standing there angry. The father wasn't waiting to judge or to have a go at his son. But instead, every day since he had gone, the father had been standing on the porch of his house, looking down the road, longing for his son to come back. And as soon as he saw his son come in the distance, the father ran to him and said, I love you. And didn't even let him finish saying sorry, but said, I love you. He said, quick, put a ring on his finger and a cloak on him, put sandals on his feet, and let's have a party. Because my son who was lost is found. My son who was dead is alive again. Here's the thing. All of us, by our own choices, because of how we've grown up, because of the world that we live in, all of us end up living as if we didn't want God, don't believe in God, don't trust God. When actually we're made to live for him and with him, full of his life. We're made to live knowing that there is someone who can provide for us and love us and protect us and has a purpose for us. We're made to live like that, but we end up living like we're scared. We end up living hurt. We end up living broken. And the promise is that God is just longing for us to come back to him. And as soon as we do, he doesn't want us to come back so he can have a go at us and he can judge us and he can tell us off. He wants us to come back so he can remind us who we are, that he can heal us up, and then we can learn to live as the children of God we're made to be. Again, I'm sorry that this has got a bit long. Try to work out how to do this shorter. But when in the baptism service we're saying, do you reject sin? Do you turn from sin and reject evil? We're saying, I want to say sorry for where I've tried to live without God. And I want to reject everything that tries to shape me to live as if God isn't real and isn't good and doesn't love me. We turn from sin, we reject evil, and we live a new life with Christ as Saviour. And we'll talk about what that looks like next week. But as we finish, let me ask you this. What do you think about that? Do you agree with it? Disagree with it? What questions do you have about it? Let's talk about those on Zoom. And if it was true, you might disagree with it, but if it was true, what difference does it make to how you see your life and how you want to live? See you on Zoom.